All right. So is that all fine? Everyone can see where it says Lean Higher Ed International Online Conference? Great, thank you. I always need that little bit of encouragement as I move through slides for some reason. Susan did a great job introducing me, so I don't really think I have to say much more, other than I really want to say that Lean, for most of the individuals in our Lean Kent State office, this isn't our only job. We really work in information technology, and we're analysts and do software development projects along with implementations, work relationship building all over the university with everyone. So we kind of start out having relationships with the same people that we typically use Lean for, but that was just something that I wanted to kind of mention, and I cannot believe it's been 20 years just this October. So just a little bit about Kent State. It is located in Ohio, in the United States. It's a public research university, and it's actually a pretty large, one of the larger ones in Ohio, and a number of students, 32,000 undergraduate students, full-time, part-time faculty, staff members. I was looking at this statistics again about how the student employees really outnumber our staff members, and kind of think that's great that they have that opportunity to work. So that's Kent. And just a little note, this is our Flash. Our little mascot is an eagle, and we call him Flash. And then we also have these black squirrels, which have kind of become a non-official mascot. So just one second, I'm gonna close the little screen here while I was going to. There we go. So what we're going to talk about today is how we have used the Lean process and principles for creative problem solving with student-focused non-transactional initiatives. And I'm definitely going to explain kind of what that means. It took me a while to figure out the right word when I say non-transactional, because I know that can mean a couple different things. But I'm going to share our story today, and I hope that you'll be able to spark some curiosity for your university and also some questions along the line, things to consider along the line with a lot of the topics that we've already been discussing here during the conference so far. So let me tell you a bit about the Lean structure at Kent State, set the groundwork here. We have a hub and spoke model, and at the center of that hub and spoke model is the Lean Kent State office, and that's run by the department I'm in, which is process evaluation and improvement, which is housed in the Division of Information Technology. Lean has an executive sponsorship from all of our various divisions across the university. And it's made up of key individuals who are called Lean liaisons and who look out for process improvement opportunities in their areas. And they work with the Lean office as well. The official training program we have for employees culminates in them becoming what we call Lean practitioners. And we have, I think right now, about maybe 125 that have gone through the program over the last number of years. And then really wrapping its support arms around the entire structure our Lean community of practice. And that's something I'm really proud of. I spoke about that last year at the conference. And it really makes a wonderful addition to the support and the continuation of individuals once they get through the training to have a place to go to continue it on. And it's open to anyone at the university, regardless of their Lean experience. So that was really, really important, that we really wanted it to be, a non-hierarchical and also open, not based not based on your experience. So it can be the beginning of your interest in Lean at Kent State. So I've shared with you a bit about our operational structures of Lean and ways that we have Lean set up. So now I want to talk about how we use Lean, or Lean in action at Kent. The Lean practitioner training is based on the DMAIC model. And we have done some training around problem solving, PDCA on a smaller non-project basis, but mostly the practitioner's introduction is with the DMAIC, and they come with projects in mind and with other individuals, either from their department or part of the process as they work through this. And they have to complete 120 days to get their practitioner certification, kind of going through the whole thing. The projects that they use or that are selected are focused on processes that are, as I mentioned, sort of transactional in nature. They have steps, right? You're performing something that moves on to something else. Some examples are human resources. We've done something on sick leave donations, finance and administration, done things on expense reimbursement, student services, private loan processes. And these processes that they pick for the projects, they're easy to measure. It's easy to measure the improvements, and that they still have to be trained on how to do that. They still have to understand how to get the baseline of how important it is to have to gather data for their to then measure the success that they're going to have. But pretty much once they understand it, it's really easy to get measurements out of the processes and the projects that they pick. And then lastly, there are tangible concepts where Lean is easily applied. And what I mean by that is that they're easily understood. So if I say a sick leave donation, you can really start to think about ways that you're going to analyze that problem. You can start thinking about the tools that you might use and the setup that you're going to go through to, really do a deep dive into that. You decide on the scope of where it begins and where it ends. So in my mind, that's what that means when I say sort of tangible concepts, tangible processes. And lastly, aside from our training and the departments doing smaller, just do it work within their areas, we have had some larger Kaizen events, which have concentrated on the strategic goals of the university throughout the years. One such example is there was a large Kaizen event on improving the students' experience with the matriculation process. And this still focused on process, right? What is their experience like? What do they do when they get to the registrars? What do they do when they get to the bursars? What is their first, where are their pain points? And they looked at each step, right? Really in deep detail. And the solutions that came out of that were great. They were software solutions, right? Having a student checklist, dynamic student checklist, which was phenomenal, and other things that are typical outcomes from a Kaizen. So, and I'll say that a number of these university-wide initiatives that have come down from the president's office or come down from higher leaderships. And even before there was a concerted effort at the university to do Lean, even before the Lean office or any training was going on, brought in consultants and did these Kaizens here or there. So the word Kaizen, and why this is important, is the word Kaizen was familiar with certain leaderships on campus beforehand. They understood that these really big events led to important outcomes, especially because the president said you need to have some outcomes, right? So people in their mind were thinking Kaizen, good thing, right? And then we go and we start rolling out Lean, more systematically and a university-wide. So I'm sure that has been so that's pretty much been our experience with Lean, and it's probably very similar to many of those of what you do at your university as well. So I want to talk about the shift that we've had a little bit in the Lean model, and that's really what this is all about, what this presentation is about. Because there's been a small shift in how Lean is being asked to be used in the last few years. And that shift has presented us with some challenges, or when looking through the Lean thinking lens, you know, we call them opportunities, right? Though sometimes it's hard to call them opportunities. But they presented us with ways to explore different Lean principles, how to use the Lean principles, processes, and tools differently. So what we're doing is, or what we've been asked to do is, we're conducting Lean events that are not examining processes and procedures, but instead they're focusing on behaviors, beliefs, and cultures. And to me, this was unique, and it could be that other universities are doing this, but to me, this was really, really unique and a little bit of a stretch for all of us. Because the behaviors aren't on your behavior of how you use Lean or you know, the culture of Lean. We're talking about the Kent State culture, the Kent State beliefs, who we are as an institution, what our behaviors are, what our values are, what our beliefs are, how we want to be represented. Sorry, I have a little gnat going around. So what I hope to do is share some of the stories of these use cases where we've had to do this, and kind of pull out little tidbits of things that we've learned, things that were really eye-opening. And then maybe we can have a conversation a little bit at the end about this as well. Okay, so I want to set the stage a little bit more. So how this came about, where we would even think to do Lean on these larger topics. Back in 2016, the university undertook a climate study, which was a university-wide assessment of learning, living, and working at Kent State. And for those universities who have done climate studies, that really is the ultimate voice of the customer, right? So you want to get a lot of data, hopefully, and if you want to get a lot of feedback and information that you can do something with, climate study is pretty impressive. So the goal of this study was to identify strengths and barriers related to Kent State being a welcoming, engaging place that nurtures a culture of inclusiveness and respect. From the findings of these survey, both the quantitative and qualitative findings, the Great Place Initiative was formed and rolled out to the university. And it produced a couple of core values. And I've put these there because when I started looking at these core values again for this presentation, I was struck with how these resonate a lot with Lean anyway, and the work that we do, or the work we want to do, or the intentional work, or the hope, the goal, for me at least, engagement that inspires positive change, right? Create a learning, living environment. It's a collaborative community, respect, kindness, and purpose in what we do, right? Those things, they just kind of fall into what I feel Lean has taught me. And so there were subcommittees that were set up to help work Kent State create and maintain this healthy, inclusive environment for all. And the GPI student subcommittee decided to use the Kaizen process on two specific categories where they had qualitative data, where they had qualitative findings, and they wanted to put forth intentional efforts around one, improving the sense of belonging or the experience of underrepresented students, and two, addressing unwanted sexual contact. The key to all of this, and why I'm giving you a little bit of the history, is that the University College Dean, who was heading the student charge, Dean Pringle, she had been instrumental in the prior Kaizens, the ones that had gone on, where they were doing, they really were looking at a process, the one about matriculation, where they had the software outcome. And so she had a really positive experience with those prior Kaizens events that looked at those processes. And she also was very certain that a Kaizen was what was needed to help with what was asked of her subcommittees that she was overseeing. So that's where we get to why it was even thought to do a Kaizen around those type of topics. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper now into a couple of these events, these Kaizens, these workshops that we had. I also realized that I could talk about these for days. I could go on and on and on and go into so much detail. They were such incredible experiences. I'm not saying that everything was perfect or there wasn't bumps along the way, but I realize I just won't have time in the hour to do that. So if anyone is interested in hearing more about any of these things and want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so, because I really would love to share some of this in even more detail. But let me just start kind of giving a bit of an overview of the first one, the student sense of belonging. And as you can see by these pictures, this was pre-COVID, right? So we were all in a room. And what you're seeing here are pictures of the members working through the process, and also the report out to the Kent State leadership. And it was made up of students, faculty, and staff, around 20 to 25. The one thing that was different with this than the other Kaizen, in the other Kaizens, even if it was working with students, they might have gathered data on the students, but they didn't include them in the events. In this Kaizen, this first one, students were driving factors. They were front and center through the whole thing, and it made a huge difference. Another thing that was interesting about this Kaizen was it was the first time that we had our lean leaders in training, I'm one of the lean leaders in training, facilitate an event. One of the things was we had a consultant who came in and taught us, and then for us to get our certification after we got our practitioner, we then had to facilitate a Kaizen all the way through, and then co-facilitate and teach someone else. So this was one where we were all on our own. We didn't have the consultant with us, and boy, was it a whopper. It helped us get our certification. So we're going in with our mindset that we need to stick by the book of what we've been taught, what we've learned, how it's worked in some other smaller ones where we've done, how to look at the payroll process, right? And I will say that a lot of the foundational artifacts worked really, really well. It gave them a structure to start with. So what I mean by that is defining the problem statement, setting a SMART goal, looking at what the scope is. That was a little bit harder to narrow that down, but they were able to do that. And they were also able to get a high level timeline of what part of the student's journey, at the beginning of their freshman year to what part of their journey do they really want to focus on. And it took a number of leadership meetings to get those foundational artifacts to a good place. And then they also had the qualitative data to use for the voice of the customer, and decided that some voice of the customer themes were out of scope for this endeavor. So they really worked through the idea of scope. Where we saw the biggest breakdown, as would be expected, was when we got to the mapping part, because there wasn't a process to map, right? So even though we knew going in, there's not a process really, we still were thinking we can do this. We can do this like we've always done it before. And it just didn't work. We just couldn't do this. You know, as facilitators, at some point, we just had to stop trying to fit a square in a circle. And so we had to look at where we needed to pivot and then look to the process owners, right? And as I mentioned at the beginning, the dean was through all of these, and she was pivotal, or she was critical in all of these. She was an active participant, right? She didn't speak over anybody or dictate what direction things needed to go at all, which was wonderful. But she was there for us as facilitators to check with and say, are we getting in the direction you want? And the pivoting that we had to do by asking them, okay, we need your help here, was really great. And actually the students being there was phenomenal. Their voice stood out like they just took charge. It was wonderful. So I want to share, because I know I'm going over. So I wanted to share a couple things about the outcomes, like personally, some of the eye openers. So the more we listen to the students, just stronger their voice and improve, and I call them improvement ideas became, their engagement really increased. And they had done, and things that they identified that were value added or non-value added. See, we still use some of that stuff. Maybe it wasn't on a flow chart, but it was on touch points and other things. That the way they were adding those in real time, that many staff and faculty were so surprised at what they saw. It was the opposite of what they thought the students would have add value. So it was just critical. And one thing that I was really proud of is that we were able to build this community of faculty, staff, and students who, when they completed this Kaizen, that they reported that they had a greater sense of belonging in the Kent State community. And that wasn't even our goal for the workshop. So I just want to say that it really changed the way, was the beginning of the way it changed the way I thought about how we could use Lean to better our university. I don't want to read the other outcomes, but I do want to, these were their action items, and they were pivotal, or can't even say the right word. They still lead the charge of where we are with Kent State, and the way we've moved today is amazing. Like the establishing a culture of care, right? We are in such a different place than we've been. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm really proud of the work that they did. So the next one was the unwanted sexual contact. And how to address that on campus. And this too was part of what was facilitated by the Lean Leaders in Training. And in fact, this was the first one that I myself was the lead facilitator for. The other one I was the co-lead. So it was extremely scary, as you can imagine. And I felt a huge responsibility due to the topic to get it right. And there were a few times when I was saying, I don't know if we really should go forth with this, but work together with, the dean and, really decided, yep, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna do this. So it was successful in that there were really meaningful outcomes, but it was even harder to get the traditional Lean formula, I'll call it, to fit. So, and during this time, I'm still in the mindset that you have to go by the book as much as you can, right? You have to, and by the second day of the 5-day, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 days, this one might have been 5, we were really stuck, and the team itself needed to own the work that needed to be done and own the process that we were for getting the result. And one of the things that we used to help them, because we needed them to step back and say, okay, what is it how are we going to get this to work for all of us and for you to get an outcome that is going to be acceptable? So one of the tips that we used was the plus delta each morning. And the plus delta, if you know, is where you talk about what something goes well, what doesn't go well, but with the caveat, if it didn't go well, can you come up with a solution? How would you fix that? So if it's cold, you want to say, yeah, it's cold, but maybe we can turn up the heat, right? So somebody's offering something. So we used that approach to reflect on how we can make improvements to the day before and the process, and how we can make improvements and how we'll need to change the process that we're using, right? Because we were even more stuck than the sense of belonging. So as I mentioned, everybody kind of came together and we came up with activities that kept us centered on the tasks at hand. One thing these activities have inspired in me is just getting all the different perspectives and experiences when they come together, that you can really move the needle in solutions and ideas that are phenomenal. And I just want to note that once again, we had the students play a pivotal role by providing their voice and the voice in the solution. And at one point we felt we didn't have enough voices because we really wanted to get some value added and non-value added voting done. And when I'm going to be very clear, when I talk about value added and not value added around unwanted sexual contact, it's strictly on the various resources that we had available, right? So we had people that, the participants went down into our student center and just grabbed random students who were willing to volunteer and come up. And that's one of the center pictures you see, that students just kind of came in and we explained to them what was going on. And they really were, they thought it was great that they could weigh in on something that was so important. And so once again, some other eye openers that I walked away with it, that you can never have enough of your student voices. If you really want to make that kind of institutional change, they have to be front and center. And then also, if you focus on the why you are there in the first place, then that can help you get unstuck. And it's okay to step back and not be the expert all the time when there's a real need for others to come forward. So I always kept my facilitation role, and I always kept us on track with timing and with moving in the right direction. But there were times when I was like, I don't know what the best exercise activity we can do to get to that. And it made them think, and they came up with ideas. So you just, I guess, have to be a little humble in that. And it's appreciated. Once again, there's just some outcomes that we have and we're still putting forth at the university, a number of years later. And this is, I will say, where they made this big connection. And you can see the word culture of care, where they hadn't really even made the connection between the two kaizens. And it just took off for a lot of work that we do at the university right now. We have a new president, I'll say, who had the leadership and individuals read Becoming a Student-Ready College, and if anyone is familiar with that. And one of the big things we have over the COVID is Flash, our mascot, our little eagle, is, flashes take care of flashes. That is across the university, and it's not just a slogan, it's felt. It really is felt. All right. One more real quick, just because I talked a little bit about what I learned. So hold on real quick, sorry. So this event came from one of the action items from the student sense of belonging, where they decided that they needed to redesign the first year experience, or our FYE curriculum, which all freshmen come in and take. And And this was a big thing to do at the university because we have all our colleges, they all play a different role in that, right? And it's kind of, you know, this is what we want to do, this is what you want to do. So but this was really trying to set a foundation where they could still do that, but there was something that was running through that was consistent through it all. So, and how this event came about was, it was to be a workshop of about 60 individuals on campus, students, faculty, and staff, and they were going to meet for a number of months as teams, larger groups, and they had a facilitator who was going to be doing design thinking for them. And I will tell you that one of the goals of this whole effort was to offer an FYE course that creates a foundation consistently for all students in the sense of belonging and community at Kent State University. So that it still is that tangible concept. You can't really feel it, right? I mean, you can feel it, but it's not like a book that you can feel, right? But COVID hit and they had to put it on hold, but they didn't want to put it on hold because these initiatives were just really making great steam. So they turned to our office in the hopes that we could try to work out a process to have this online for 4 6-hour days. And the glutton for punishments that we said, sure. We had switched our lean practitioner training over to online. So I wasn't really worried about all the online pieces that we had to do in the online collaboration. In fact, I saw some strengths with that. So I felt comfortable in that realm, though I knew, and I knew going in that there wasn't a process. This does not have a process. Don't try to even come up with a swim lane. There's no way to try and do this traditional Kaizen. So I really made sure that I prepared a lot better. And just a little bit of an overview there were the 60 individuals, and they had small and large group work where they broke out into groups, and then they came back together with large groups. We used online collaboration tool. We used Miro, was absolutely crucial to get this to work. And we did do a bit of design thinking in this, in some elements of it. I did research to see, okay, what areas of that, what kind of language can I use to make this even stronger than just lean? But lean was 100%, it definitely was there. So the lessons learned for this, at this point, there weren't any really huge eye-opening experiences like before. But some of the lessons learned that I wanted to share, just with this one in particular, is make sure that you have a goal for the event along with the overarching goal. So for example, they wanted to have a draft of this curriculum by the end of the workshop that we called it. But they also had that overarching goal. It was easy at times to say, okay, are we heading in the direction of your workshop goal? Do you think, you know, and me and myself as a facilitator, I would have to say, am I getting there? Are we getting there? As well as touching base on that overarching goal. Whenever we would get stuck, we would come back around and work with the, I guess I could call her the sponsor, but she was really the lead of or the owner of the workshop. You want to use the language that they want. This was the first time where we did not use customer for students. We were still using the word customer in the other Kaizen, so we explained what that meant, and that was fine. But the faculty that were involved with this, and there was a lot more faculty involved with this, were pretty adamant. Don't call them customers. So we didn't, and it wasn't a big deal. You know, it was just their students. And we kind of explained that. Always have a lead for each small breakout group, not necessarily a facilitator, but that you had somebody there that was part of the conversation that they were all having, that could keep the conversation going to help them reach that overarching goal. Because I would go in as a facilitator and bounce in and out, but I wasn't hearing the conversation in the way that this team lead was. You can never do enough preparation for the event. Never. But just do it. But if you can, continue to do it. And then it's okay to mix and match tools and methodologies as necessary to reach those goals. It's okay to try something new or something old and have it fail, but just make sure you have some backup plans, right? Just say, okay, I mean, I tried the impact effort. I said, I'm going to throw this one in. I mean, I've done this so many times and I really think it's going to have value for what they were doing with the ideas that they came up with. They hated that. They really thought that was of no value. So, you know, but I had many other backup plans that kept us in tools that kept us moving along. So, all right. So key takeaways of all of those events that I've been talking about. And one is have a strong committed sponsor or owner. I don't know if we could have done this if somebody was sort of wishy-washy and they weren't there along with us. So if you're going to undertake something like that, you have to have. Dean Pringle is amazing and just, it's wonderful. Setting the foundation beforehand is important. So we used to just do one leadership meeting where you kind of get the artifacts, you know, for our regular events that we would do. But we would do 2, 3, 4. The unwanted sexual, it took a long time to get the, when I say leadership, I mean the leadership of the people that were kind of heading up the workshops. I mean, they were part of the workshops. But setting that, making sure that everyone is on the same page. And then when you go into the event, you bring it back and get consensus from the whole group that's there. Trust the process, but don't be afraid to pivot. One of the things that we found, and I think that this is one of the things that kept them coming back and asking if we could do more, was we were flexible. And that flexibility allowed it to work. We didn't hold on to, nope, it's got to be our way. You know, we were flexible, and I think that, and I know that really meant a lot, and it really got us to where we needed to go. Don't forget to have your customer, your student, as part of the team. That's something that I really now in my other work, I really hone that in and say, you have to have the person there. You have to have some sort of representation, even especially if you don't have the voice, that you haven't collected any voices through data, you know, that you can use as data. Imagine a different way to use a tool. Step outside the box. I love the idea of taking, you know, one tool and how can I change this with something else? How can I morph it into something a little bit different to make it work for what's at hand? And then continuous improvement is best when it is a collaborative effort. I felt, sure, continuous improvement is also an individual effort, but I think when you put forth an idea and someone else then has that idea, and on and on and on, you build so much with making sure that that improvement will stick, because it's not just your voice that says, let's do this, it's everybody's voice. And you get to see, and everyone's got a little bit of a piece in there. So I really liked that. All right, I'm coming to the end. So what does this really mean about how, so when I started this presentation way back when, in my thinking about it a couple months ago, it was really lean process and using lean process and principles for creative problem solving. And I still feel that way. And when I was learning to be a lean leader and a lead facilitator and practitioner, I did not do anything in manufacturing or in healthcare or government with lean. It was strictly lean higher ed. So this is all I know. And one of the things that was really important was Bill's book, right? And so I have a couple things in here. And even if these bullet points might not have meant what I took them to mean, there is a way that, just like how you can interpret different tools, you can interpret the way something is said or something is offered up. So for me, the universities can introduce intentional changes that can ensure success by using lean. Their new alternative to address challenges, right? That's what we did. Comprehensive approach to systematic change. This really helps set that, give a process, whatever that might have been, to help them with their systematic change that's still going on. Responds to the needs and expectations of those served by higher education, and it is becoming part of the culture. The last thing that, and so I'll speak to that. When I read that, those points and the points I'm going to say on this slide gave me permission to use lean to do the work with those areas in the way that I thought was best to use lean. So taking a step back even further, if you look at the lean core principles that we've been talking about, respect for the individual, continuous improvement of the process, of the work we do, the individual, of our organization, of our culture, right? I used to have this slide and I kind of stopped at maybe of our organization. And then I've added of the culture, because I'm saying that you can change your culture using these sorts of methods, principles, and tools, along with other things. But lean gave me, like I said, lean gave me the permission to do this and to help. All right, so I have some questions that I want us to ponder. And I think that we have time for some questions and discussions and answers. And I will say that I had an activity scheduled, but I had to take that off, and I can share that later out in my presentation. It was an empathy exercise that kind of put together that I used and I still use. And I kind of line that up with understanding the voice of the customer, but you know, using sort of that empathetic, I can't even say that, approach as well. But these questions that I have up here, so, and I've thought about this a lot, even before this conference. So it's really timely, to be honest. So at what point do we need to stop calling it lean and start calling it something else? So when individuals would reach out to me, and so now we've had some faculty, the last thing I did was a faculty, a new school was creating a faculty handbook. And if you understand, a faculty handbook isn't just, you know, A, B, and C. It decides merit. It decides promotion and tenure. It decides a lot of contentious things. And they wanted to come at this workshop where it was this sense of inclusion and positive and how they were going to grow together as a new unit that was formed, right? So, but the point is that the faculty member who had been at one of the FYE Kaizens had reached out and asked about this, said, can we schedule a lean? So it was like, I wasn't even quite sure what to call it, but I have to say the word lean doesn't have a bad taste at the university. In the academic realm, for the most part, might not quite be able to understand what the word lean means yet, but they are using it. So at what point do we need to stop calling it lean and start calling it something else, right? And not just necessarily coming up with a definition of lean in higher ed, though that is important, but I was wondering, can I still call this lean? Even in some flavor, can I do that? And also, does it hinder or help create a lean culture when lean is used in the broadest of terms? Right? is this helping if we go down this path a little bit too much with the individuals who still are doing the transactional areas, right? We had one of our lean leaders, when she was my co-facilitator, never wanted to do lean again because that was just too daunting, you know, that it just didn't line up. And I totally understand that, but that brings that question, right? I think you can do both, but you know, we can have this conversation. And then if we are adding value where it is needed and how it is needed in the university, especially when they are really struggling and are really seeking help wherever it can be, then should we be worried about these other two questions, right? So what additional value can lean thinking bring to all aspects of higher ed and areas within the community? So that is my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing.